Welcome to this second part of the Ruby Blocks screencast. In this screencast, I will introduce more concepts about Ruby Blocks, and let's get started. I'm going to show you another difference between proc and lambda. Last screencast, we saw the difference between proc and lambda in terms of argument checking. Now we'll see another difference. So when I print this value, it says hi. Usually the way Ruby methods behave, the last statement, that should have been the return value. But when you use proc.new, that's not the way it behaves. So if I use lambda, just change this to lambda, and do the same thing, see, it returns the last line in the method. So it behaves more like a Ruby function. So that's another difference between using lambda and proc.new. The next I'm going to show you how we can pass multiple proc objects. Proc1, proc2, proc2.call, doesn't matter what, proc1.call. When you want to call this, you need to call it like this, foo lambda these are the arguments to the method. In this case, you are passing the proc objects as arguments to the method. Proc2, run this, get proc2 is called first and the proc1 is called again. So what if we just have, see, previous examples I've been showing, and my block, and you could just call my block.call, and in that case it's not really an argument to the method. You pass it like this, you just give it a block, puts hi, and it'll print hi. So I'm not doing this. It's not an argument to the method. It's a block. So if I do this, it'll blow up. And I cannot do this either. Lambda, like this. Long number of arguments, because foo is not expecting any arguments. It would work if I had a variable here and do a dot call, then it will work because it's an argument. The purpose of this thing here is to convert the block you pass into a proc object. Okay, so I can make this thing more clear. It's just a block. It implicitly converts my block.call. See, it converts the block to a proc object. This is essentially the same as, let's say, if you just say yield, it yields to the nameless function and says hi. And what if I want to have a name? So it basically my block equals proc then I can just say myblock.call. So it's kind of similar to prefixing it with ampersand and saying myblock in the after the foo method. So this is hi. So that's where the subtle differences are. And now we'll see the difference between, we'll see what closure is. Here's an example for closure. There's no variable x equals 5. Let me just print the value of this closure, call the closure here. So the value of x is 5. After I change the value of x equals 1, say puts x, that value of x is 1. What happens if I call the closure again after I change the value of x? It's still 5. So in here, instead of this block, the value of x was 5 because it's in this context, in this scope, the value of x is 5 and it's essentially frozen. And you can access it wherever you access it, whether in another file or within the same file. The value would essentially be the same thing when it was actually this proc object was created. So there's the concept of closure. Another example for closure. For initialize method, which takes a greeting variable, my block equals takes a block variable, and then it just prints the greeting and then the name. And the greet method takes a name and then calls the block with that name variable. So the block variable gets its value when the method greet is called. When the object is created, the greeting value is set essentially, but this thing is open. So that value does not get anything assigned until you call the greet method. So that's the slight difference here in this example. And then when you call this greet English greeting, the greet, you can see it prints the appropriate values. But now if I try to access greeting here, it throws a error message saying undefined local variable or method greeting from main object. So the context here is the main class object, and it says I don't know where this variable is. It does not have any visibility. Whereas this, due to closure, this proc object has essentially frozen the values of greeting. The bonjour and the hello gets frozen, and you have access, and it prints when you call this greet method. It internally calls the block, which has the values for greeting when it was created. So the next example, I'm going to show you few things that's available in Ruby. Repeat n times. I just want to yield to the block. If block given. This block given is a Ruby built-in method. That will return true or false depending on whether the block was passed in or not. So repeat 2 times, and then you pass in a block. And I run this. It repeats twice hi. N dot times, 2 dot times, it yields to this block. And if, in this case, if block given returns true. So I'm going to make a few changes to the same thing, and maybe I'll just have it for comparison reasons. Def repeat 2 and then n block. You can have a block n dot times block dot call. Instead of doing if block given, you can also do if block. When you don't pass in any block, it's going to be nil. So if you do if block, it will evaluate to false when nil basically evaluates to false. So you can call this twice with some block. So it's essentially the same thing. Instead of calling the nameless function, I have a specific name to that proc object. So I use that name and I call it. The last one is very similar. I'll just copy it over. In this case, only difference is instead of doing a block.call, I'm just going to say yield. Even though I have a block that's going to get the value of the proc object, I'm just use the yield and call it this way. and that will also work. So there are so many different ways of doing it. So the next example is going to be a very important example. This basically, so far we have seen all the ways where you pass in a block and then that gets converted to a proc object. Now we'll see how a proc object gets converted to a block. So we are going reverse. So in this example is from Programming Ruby book. Times or plus times gets the user input. Based on the user input, this is creating a proc object. So the collect method in the enumerable mix in actually enumerable module expects block. So I prefix the proc object with ampersand. So it gets converted, proc object gets converted to block and it gets executed. So let's run this. So script is requiring input times, let's say I want to do times t, let's say 2, and it's created based on that. It went through 1 to 10 and it just multiplied 2 to each and every element in that range, 2 times 1 all the way to 2 times 10. So basically the blocks allows you to reuse logic. You can pass it as a argument to methods written as a result from a method, and it's a way to reuse code with in different under different context basically. So that's it. So if you like this screencast, please take a few minutes and give me a recommendation on working with Rails. Thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.